to everybody who's joined. This is really cool that Nathan's putting this together, and we really appreciate the opportunity that we have to present a little bit today. So Nathan and I talked about this, or Dr. Knapp and I talked about this a little bit previously, and I thought that it'd be really great to bring in some other people that I really look up to in the music industry and that have similar backgrounds. So quickly, I guess we can kind of just go through, and it'll be a bit of a panel discussion, and we can each introduce ourselves. I'm Dr. Scott Campbell. I am the woodwind category manager for Conn-Selmer. So that means that I oversee the woodwind division here. That's saxophones, flutes, clarinets, oboes, bassoons. I oversee product development, marketing, sales, operations in terms of manufacturing, quality control, those types of things. But before I came into this, I was a full-time saxophonist down in Texas. I was teaching at a massive private studio, and then I taught adjunct at 2 universities. So the 2 people that I've asked to join me are Mike Fenoglio and Christophe Grezes. Mike, do you mind introducing yourself?
Sure. Yeah, my name is Michael Fenoglio. I am the director of marketing at a company called Danzer, who many of you might know as Van Doren USA. We are the importer for Van Doren products in the United States, but we also import some other products and distribute some other products. Dennis Wick mutes and mouthpieces for brass instruments, Jones double reeds, Smith mallets, and super sensitive strings. So my job as director of marketing is kind of a combination of 3 major areas, one of which being artist relations. I run our artist clinician program, which is our educational outreach program that provides free clinics to middle schools and high schools and some colleges throughout the country every year. And then a lot of educational outreach. So part of that comes through that program, but other ways as well, college visits, clinics conducted by myself or other Danzer staff. And then a lot of just traditional sales and marketing for all of our brands. I kind of oversee those all together now. So that's my main job now with Danzer. Before Danzer, I was like a lot of you, freelance musician, teaching, playing as much as I could. Got my doctorate from University of Illinois, where I studied with Professor Richtmeyer and Chip McNeil. And yeah, that's basically my background before I got to the music industry.
Awesome. Thanks, Mike. And then this is Christophe Grezes, who's one of my counterparts over in summer Paris. Go ahead, Christophe.
Yeah. Hi, guys. So yeah, I'm Christophe Grezes from France. I'm living in Paris, and I'm working now for Henry Summer Paris company as a mouthpiece product manager. So I'm also a musician. I see saxophone, and I play in a saxophone quartet, morphing saxophone quartet. And I'm working for Summer now since 8-9 years.
Uh-oh.
You know, probably the concept.
I'm like just saying 15 seconds back.
Okay, just that I'm working for Selmer since 8-9 years now, and I'm in charge of all mouthpieces for the brand.
Right, and you designed the concept mouthpiece line and the Claude DeLongo mouthpiece.
Exactly. When I came to the company in 2012, it was. I worked first on the range. We had the S80, S90, Soloist, and all the mouthpieces we had in the range, because we had to clean everything. And just after that, I worked on the concept family. I started with the alto, as you know, and after that the soprano and the tenor. And now we are working on the Claude DeLongo mouthpiece.
Great. Awesome. Well, awesome. Thank you both for joining me on this. I think it's an important topic to talk about. I've really had my eyes opened. I've been on this side of the industry for coming on 2 years now. But people in your positions are the people that really kind of opened up my mind to these job opportunities. And frankly, I love it. I mean, it's been an absolute thrill and a joyride and a thrill ride sometimes. So what we'll do is we can each kind of go through and I'll ask you questions to kind of just prompt your story. And then we'll kind of talk about opportunities that we see in the music industry right now. So I'll give a brief, kind of a brief story, and then Mike, I'll ask you some questions. Then Christophe, I can ask you some questions as well. So, you know, originally I got my undergraduate in woodwind performance, and that's what the time that I decided that, you know, I did want to have a family and I did want to be a musician. So I thought music education would be a really good fit for me. And I thought, well, the best music education gig is probably being a professor. So I'm going to be a university professor. And to become a university professor, I need a doctorate in saxophone. So I'm going to go get a doctorate in saxophone. I mean, it was really a pretty pragmatic approach. And so I worked from there. I got my master's and I went and got my doctorate. Now, of course, as you get to the end of your doctorate, you get to know your professors better. You get to understand the world of academia better. And my eyes were opened quite a bit more as to like the real job of a university professor. I mean, there's a lot, you know, there's a lot to it, more than meets the eye from a student. And so, you know, so I started to open my mind in that regard of what I was getting myself into, which was all good things, don't get me wrong. But then I also, I got my doctorate at University of North Texas, and in Texas, there's just these massive band programs that rely on private lesson staff. And so there's a lot of people that have either moved to Texas or studied in Texas and stay and do private teaching. And I had an amazing career doing that. I loved what I was doing. And in fact, at one point I had stopped looking at university jobs completely because I was very satisfied with doing that. I had a studio of around, it fluctuated between 80 to 100 students. I ran summer camps and I ran the Texas Youth Saxophone Ensemble. And I was just elated doing what I was doing that. And I had started all that well before I finished my doctorate degree. So by the time I finished my doctorate degree, I was applying for a couple tenure track positions, but eventually I just stopped and was focused on what I was doing, and I really liked it. I had some amazing opportunities to become an artist for Van Doren and for Selmer. And that really starting to get, when I got those relationships, obviously Mike was very influential in that. He I think kind of started his role around the same time that I became an artist, and he and I became good friends, and he kind of helped open my eyes a little bit to this whole world of the music industry. And then also with Selmer, I was able to come up to corporate up here in Elkhart, Indiana. That's where we're based out of, and I would do what are called artist selects, where I'd come up and handpick saxophones for some of the stores back in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. And I remember, in fact, Mike, you probably won't even remember this, but we went one time, I think it was like NASA, when we had NASA at the Lubbock at a Texas Tech or something like that. So one of those, but we went and had lunch and we were just talking a little bit. And I had asked you, I said, so are you applying to any of the tenure track positions out there or anything like that? And you just kind of chuckled and you said, no, I'm very happy with where I'm at. You know, I thought, oh, well, that's really interesting. And that kind of caught me off guard. And then Bob Lichty was my predecessor, and I really saw how much he enjoyed his position. Anyway, when this position came open, there was a listing for the position, and he posted it on Facebook. I had a quick look at it. I didn't meet any of the criteria. You know, they wanted someone with an MBA. They wanted someone with music industry experience. And though I had experience being a small business owner, running a large private studio, running these camps and stuff like that, and then doing some real estate stuff, I certainly didn't have experience in the music industry. And I definitely didn't have an MBA. But my wife did. And so that was a little helpful. So all they wanted was a resume. So I submitted my CV. You know, they wanted like a 2-page resume. I submitted like my 14-page academic CV. And I was amazed that they actually, you know, they reached out to me, asked me to come up to Elkhart, Indiana, which I visited several times. I knew several of the people here already, but I interviewed for the position. Then when I found out what I would be doing, I was like, whoa, this is really, really, really cool. That a position like this actually exists. So I was immediately interested, and I was very, very, very fortunate to be offered the job. And so now I've come from this academic and then private teaching and then doing the summer camps. And then I taught adjunct at 2 universities while I was down in Texas as well. Coming from that side of things over into the product music industry side of things. So that's kind of my whole transition. But I wanted to go back to when I had that conversation with Mike that really kind of opened my eyes. I also had this realization that it really doesn't matter who you are. Everybody has a day job. You know, I was gigging a lot down in Texas, and I kept playing with this trumpet player. And this trumpet guy, he was an analyst for an insurance company. And he had a 6-digit income. He had a great job, great benefits, and he played on the side. And he got paid the exact same amount that I did. But he used that money for fun, and I used that money to feed my family. and so I played with several guys like that who were just outstanding players. And they did it on their spare time. They had these different day jobs. And I started to think more about that and think about the music industry. And I did realize that it really doesn't matter who you are. Everybody has a day job. And I mean, guys like I really admire. So in my role, I had a day job of teaching 80 to 100 kids a week. And that was my day job. And then on the side, I got to perform stuff that I really wanted to, you know, and then being a full-time music professor, their day job is teaching university classes and lessons to students. And we all enjoy that. Hopefully we're doing careers that we love and it's enjoyable and it's not really like work, but it is our day job. But surely that there's other more creative things that they do outside of their day job that really fills their creative well. So, I mean, even Kenny G, you know, at the end of the day, Kenny G has a day job, and that's playing smooth jazz to large crowds of people. But that guy still practices 3 hours a day, and I'm not going to speak for him, but I'm assuming he doesn't practice Songbird 3 hours a day. You know, I'm sure there's a lot of other stuff that he's practicing that fills his creative well. So having that paradigm shift of, you know, everybody has a day job. And at the end, even, you know, I loved what I was doing, teaching those 80 to 100 kids a week. And then, you know, doing these summer camps and stuff, it was still my day job and it was work. And then on the side, every once in a while, I get to practice the music that I really wanted to. I get to perform the music I really wanted to. So I think everyone kind of has that situation. It just depends on what your day job is. So Mike, you know, you had talked a little bit about your academic studies, but could you talk a little bit about, you know, where did you go to school overall for your 3 degrees? And then what was your initial career path?
Yeah, well, it was very similar to how you outlined yours, to be honest, as far as what I was going for. But I did my undergrad degree at a small private school in Decatur, Illinois called Millikan University. Great saxophone professor there named Perry Rask. He's really been my mentor from the start. I was a commercial music major, which was kind of their default jazz degree. Some studio stuff, jazz classes. But if you studied with Perry, he taught you the saxophone. So that also meant a lot of classical work right alongside. So you basically got a performance degree along with whatever your real major was. So that was fantastic. After that, I went and I worked on cruise ships for a couple years, which for any of you that are not familiar with that, you get paid to play really bad music, but you see parts of the world that you never thought you would see. So it was a really fun period of my life that I never want to do again, but I highly recommend it to anyone coming out of their undergrad degree. And that's also where I really realized that, you know, making a career out of music is really cool. I don't think I really thought about it that much going through my undergrad. I was too busy practicing and playing and all of that stuff. Then I went on cruise ships and I thought, yep, this is what I'm meant to do in some fashion. So once I was done with cruise ships, I went to DePaul University in Chicago for my master's in jazz performance, where I studied with Mark Colby and also the classical professor at the time, Susan Cook. So throughout all my degrees, I kept my classical playing going, not only because I enjoyed it, but I also thought it was really good for me as a saxophonist and especially for my teaching and for the students that I was working with. So Chicago was great, playing around town as much as I could, networking a lot. I think many of you, especially in your undergrad degrees right now, might not realize how much you'll continue to work with and rub shoulders with people that you went to school with, years down the road. So that's been a really fun part, I think, of even slipping into the industry the way that I did later on, is just seeing familiar faces and working with them in new ways. And then after DePaul, I came down to University of Illinois, where again, I studied with Chip McNeil for a jazz studies degree, and also studied with Deborah Richtmeyer and many of her wonderful students, grad students that were there at the time. I was their split TA, so I would teach a lot of the undergrad music ed major classical lessons, along with some non-major classical lessons. And then I did a lot of different things on the jazz side, directing big bands, small groups, teaching a lot of private lessons to undergrad and grad students. So that was my way through academia. A lot like Scott, I guess my first reason for going through so much schooling was because I wanted to become the best saxophone player and teacher that I could. I just loved it, and I was soaking it up, and I didn't want it to end. That was the first and foremost reason why I was there, and it just made a lot of sense to me in order to continue doing what I loved and have a little bit of stability also. A university professor job seemed like my path at the time. I never knew anything about the industry that I work in now. It's something that I hope that colleges and universities can do a better job of making students aware of, because there are a lot of jobs in what we do. But I had no idea about it. So as I was finishing up my dissertation at U of I started working part-time. Actually, one of my friends who was working there part-time left the job. So I started working part-time for Danzer, the company I'm with now, in artist relations. So I'm working on my paper and working about 20 hours a week, sending artist orders to all of our, hundreds of endorsing artists, managing our trial program, things like that, mouthpiece trial program. So that was my part-time job, alongside of a lot of gigs and a lot of private teaching. I was also teaching at a local high school, running some of their jazz bands and all of their small groups, which was really fun. I loved that. But I did this part-time job for about 6 months with Danzer, and then a sales position opened up. So I went from artist relations to sales. And right around that same time, we started what we called at the time our regional artist program. And now it's called the Artist Clinician Program. But Scott was actually one of our very first regional artist signings. And we miss him. But it's been a really great change of relationship ever since. It's been fantastic. So I explained that program a little bit earlier, but that is really, I think, within my job, especially at the time, was where I was getting the most fulfillment, working with people like Scott and like-minded people that were, really great players, great teachers, and with similar backgrounds as myself, but still kind of a little more in the field than I was at that point. I did that for about a year on sales, and then our brand manager position opened up on the Van Doren side. And that was basically, you manage all the marketing operations for Van Doren. So it's some artist relations, some traditional sales and marketing, which has turned into, a lot of social media that I help oversee. I don't actually do the work now with that. We have a wonderful woman named Rebecca Schuldorf that does that. Ad placement, all of those sorts of things. So managing the brand, basically. And then very recently, I was promoted to director of marketing, where I'll do that similar kind of oversight role with all of our different brands. But again, none of this was on my radar at all, because nobody told me about it. I don't think I would have done anything differently. I was too obsessed with the saxophone and getting better. But I'm really glad it worked out the way that it did. And it's provided some amazing opportunities for me and my family. And one thing, if you forget everything else that I just said, one thing I would encourage you to remember is to be open-minded, and remember that everything you're learning now as a student is preparing you for a job in this industry, whether you realize it or not.
Right. That's great. Thank you, Mike. sorry, real quick, before we go to Christophe, Nathan, if you can hear me, my phone for some reason is draining battery really fast. So I've set up my computer. So I'm going to try to switch to my computer right now.
I signed you in.
Okay. And then start video. Unmute. So that means I can turn this off.
Looks good to me. We can't hear you, Scott.
You look great, though.
Maybe sign out of the one on your phone.
Scott, in the meantime, do you want us to move to Christophe?
Yeah. Okay. Okay. So I can say that I'm a bit happy now because Scott, every month we have a meeting, and we are the French guy. We are always in a bad situation with the technology, and now it's your turn. You know. But
Scott?
oh, yeah.
Yeah, you call.
Okay, I will follow with this. So it's quite the same stories than Scott and Michael. I started saxophone when I was 11, and my goal at that time was to play, and that's it. And after, when I went 16, more or less, I had an experience in a company, in my mother company, and I was in charge of photocopy, you know, a bad job. And at that time I said, okay, never I want to work in a company. I want to be a musician, you know. So I started to, when I was 16, I started to study a lot, my saxophone, to practice a lot, and just to be a musician, to play, to make concerts. And it was not question of education, of teaching at that time. And after that, I was in Toulouse, in the South France, studying with Philippe Lecoq and his wife Florence Lecoq. And I finished my studies. I was 18 at that time, and I went to Paris, to Versailles with Vincent David. And at that time, it was really clear for me. I wanted to be a musician, to make concerts, and nothing else. So I was practicing 8-9 hours a day. It was crazy, totally crazy. I spent like this 2 or 3 years with Vincent, studying like this, and I entered in the Paris Conservatory with Claude Delong, and it was the same goal, always the same goal, to be a musician. And at the end, during my studies, I started acoustic. In the Paris Conservatory, there is an acoustic class. I started this. It was an option at the beginning, and after it was a class. And it was really interesting for me to understand how the instrument I was playing 9 hours a day was working. It was really interesting, and very helpful for me for my playing after that. And at the end of the studies, the acoustic studies, I make a work about mouthpieces acoustic, and just for me to know how it works. And at the end of my studies, Claude Delongle asked me if I wanted to start in the summer company as a certificator. Certificator is it was the first time at that time the job was created, and because Summer changed the sales manager, and sales manager Stéphane Asquet wanted to make a new job at the end of the chain of production, to be sure that all saxophones are certificated by a musician, professional musician. So Claude asked me if I wanted to start with this in the summer company. And of course, I just finished my studies. Why not? It was, for me, it was a transition, you know, and after that, let's see, I had all my teaching diplomas, and we'll see. And a few months later, Stéphane Asquet, the same guy, wanted one person in charge of mouthpieces in summer. But there was Florent Millot, my colleague in charge of saxophone, Stéphane Gentil, my other colleague in charge of clarinet, and nobody for mouthpieces. As you know, mouthpiece is really important part of the saxophone of the instrument. So it was crazy to not have anybody in charge of this project. And that's it. I started working with Summer at this as a product manager like this. And now I want to say I don't want to come back to another job. I'm really happy with this. There is a very good team. It's a good product. We are really happy, and all the team in the factory or in the head office is very open-minded. So there is no question to come back to teach or to make other things. But on the same way, I'm also a musician. I'm following the musician part also. So I'm playing with a saxophone quartet. It's a morphing saxophone quartet, and we have plenty of concerts, and it's really a good balance between music and music industry. And Scott, you have always big problem. Okay.
Scott, I'm not sure what audio issues you're having there. If you want to type any of the things you want me to lead the discussion on, you can certainly send them to me, and we can go about it that way. Sorry about this, everyone. So yeah, can you talk a little bit about how you keep a balance between performing and your day job? You know, Mike, if you'd like to go first.
Sure. Yeah, you know, this is one of the most common questions that I get from my friends and people that knew me going through college, and they say, are you playing enough, or are you still playing? And the answer is absolutely yes. I'm playing. That's my first love. I did just quit teaching privately about 6 months ago, but that was a decision not for my job. For the most part, my hours outside of when I travel are mostly 8 to 5, and my evenings are free to do whatever I'd like. And as a jazz musician, that's when all the work is anyway. So I still play quite a bit. But I do have 2 very young children, a 1-year-old and a 3-year-old. So I don't play as much as I used to, and it's because of them, not so much because of my job. But I still have, you know, a few gigs a month on average, I would say. Sometimes a little more, sometimes a little less, but it's I could never quit playing. It's practicing is a little different, but I think most people realize that once they get out of college, and especially once you have a family, you got to figure something out. but I still play regularly, and that'll never stop.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. It's really, really important to follow playing and practicing and playing in concert. In our job, the more how to say that, the more important part of this is that we are a musician, and to speak to musician, it's there is no comparison. It's not possible to do this job without being a musician, I think.
Yep. Bernard Van Doren always tells us that we cannot, our main goal is we must stay close to the musician. And so that's at Danzer, and I'm sure in Selmer and Conselmer, it's a company full of musicians.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, in the story of Selmer, and it's the same in Van Doren. The founder of the owner of the Selmer company was a musician, was clarinetist on Selmer, and his brother Alexandre Selmer was also a clarinetist and professional musician. And still that time, from that time to now, all the people in charge of artistic relation or to be part of the R&D department are all musicians and professional musicians. All.
Can you guys hear me now?
Gotcha.
Oh yeah.
Okay, I called in on my phone, so hopefully it won't die. Those are all great insights. Thank you for talking about that. And it is, it's so important that we keep our performance ability, or just our ability to play the instrument and diagnose it well and develop it well, and to keep close relations with the artists. It's very, very important that we stay close to the musicians. In fact, I probably feel more pressure now than when I was a teacher. It's really interesting. Once I graduated with my doctorate, I went on and was teaching all these kids, and I wanted to keep studying, but I never did. But now that I'm in this role, I still take private lessons, every week, just to continue to progress and improve, and then apply that to the instruments and how we develop them. So how we can further develop the instruments. So that's great. Now, if we could, let's change gears a little bit, and let's talk about job opportunities that we see inside of the music industry. So of course, outside of academia in general, there's lots of job opportunities. And I don't mean to get into all those. I'm no expert. I'm no expert at the music industry, but I'm certainly no expert at theater or many other different artist management, all these other facets that are out there. But just within the music industry, what are some job opportunities or future opportunities that you see within the music industry right now?
Mike, you want to start?
Sure. As far as specific jobs, I haven't really thought too in depth on that, but what I can tell you is what I've kind of discovered, the skill sets that you're all developing and that we were all developing throughout our studies, how they've kind of applied to what we do now, or what I do now. I think as a performer or a performance-focused person, education-focused person, one thing to realize is that you're rubbing shoulders with the core market of our industry, which is, believe it or not, it's not necessarily professional musicians as far as where the numbers are for the United States, at least. It's more middle schools and high schools and things like that. But either way, it's musicians, right? We sell products to musicians. So everything that you're doing, the skills you're working on is going to help you relate to your core market. So I think that whether you're a performance major or education major, you're setting yourself up in a good way for sales and marketing roles, of which there are many throughout the industry. We're only talking really woodwinds today for the most part, but there are audio companies and all sorts of different types of companies within the industry. If you ever have a chance to go to the NAMM show in Los Angeles, do it, and you'll have an idea of just how large in scope the industry and the opportunities are. And even just learning to be a teacher, part of our job is still teaching. And that was kind of a welcome realization for me when I started going out and working with college studios or going into high schools and helping you still get to flex your teaching chops. So there are, there are educator specialists in some companies. There are, people that are managing artist clinician programs, things like that. And then maybe above all, as a musician, one thing that we all have to be on the top of our game with is networking. And I think that is so key to no matter what job you envision yourself or fall into in the future, is just your ability to work with people and network with people, and stay open-minded to the various opportunities that might happen. But I can give you a little bit more specific direction within my company. We're a small company, Danzer. I don't know offhand how many employees we have in the United States, probably 25 or so. We have 3 musician advisory studios, one in New York City, one in Chicago, one in Los Angeles. And at each of those studios, there are people dedicated to helping people find equipment. I'm not saying there are a million jobs like that in this country or any country or the world, but those are kind of product specialist type positions. There are brand managers. There are, for people that maybe they're not the most extroverted person, there are sales, or customer service representative jobs. There are accounting positions. And so maybe for some of our music business folks that are maybe a little bit more in tune with that than any of us probably were going through our degrees, those are some options. So there's, like any business, there are a lot of different levels to the company, a lot of different positions. But I've always felt that as musicians, with the focus that we had going through school, and probably that many of you do, you're setting yourself up really well for sales and marketing type positions, especially.
Yeah, and you've brought up a recurring theme, is the importance of networking. I mean, so many times, obviously I'm not a specialist in double reeds, for example. I do play saxophone, clarinet, and flute, but double reeds are a total mystery to me, or at least they were. And even in that regard, I don't consider myself a specialist on clarinet and flute. And so many times I've had to reach out to my colleagues that I went to school with, who are now university professors or old professors that were specialists on those instruments, and get feedback from them and use them as a specialist and as like a private contractor on product development stuff. So really networking, getting to know people outside of just the saxophone and outside of just your immediate circle is hugely beneficial going down the road, not just for gigs,
Right.
but for other opportunities in the future. Christophe, what kind of insight do you have?
Yeah, we can speak about the production side also, because we spoke about marketing, about sales, about artistic relation, but there is we need also musician in the production side, in the R&D department, to develop instruments, to develop mouthpieces. We need people who are musicians, who are saxophonists, and with big knowledge on acoustic. We need this kind of people, and also there in the production. We have in Selmer, in the factory, we have a lot of people who are musicians, and they are working on the production tools. The machine, how to work on the product with this kind of machine is really important. Also to have a connection with the music. You don't need to be a professional musician for that, but to have the sensibility for the music, for the product, is really very important. For example, our purchase manager in Selmer is a saxophonist and clarinet player. Just because he knows how to speak about the product with our how to say, customers. And it's very important to have always a connection with music in the production, in the development, and of course in the sales and marketing and artistic relation.
No.
Scott.
Anybody have any questions?
Sometimes this takes, a little bit for the questions to be typed in. So we'll just give it a few seconds. But, I guess Did you feel like there were, I'll start with one. Did you feel like there were any particular experiences that you had during your schooling? I mean, obviously, you know, Scott mentioned that he had met people that he liked and respected, you know, in his career path, that all of a sudden he just started to think about the day job versus performing on the side. But were there any experiences you had in school that opened your eyes to this, or do you think that's something that, I guess moving forward, how would you want schools to try to interface or collaborate with the industry more in order to build that connection?
I'll go ahead and start. One really easy thing, I think, is just for schools to open their blinders a little bit more when they think of the music business. A lot of times at a lot of schools, that means recording studio, which, you know, with the advent of technology where everybody can build their own home studio, those types of jobs are harder to come by. So I think just being a little bit more open-minded to what the industry really is, and working hard to connect your internship programs to companies like us. We host interns most every semester, maybe 2 out of 3. And I know a lot of other companies within the industry do the same thing. So yeah, I think at least from at the academic level, I think that would be a really positive first step, would just to expand beyond recording studio and start looking at the product industry a little bit more.
Yeah, in the same way, our job is to facilitate your life, the life of the musician. You know, to make products, better products, more easier to play without practicing. So it could be nice if there is more links between the musical industry and the university, because all students want to have a new material, to have a material who plays well with no problem in how to say, in the emission, in the sound, the better sound as possible. And it could be nice to have more connection with this.
Can you guys hear me now?
Can.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, I'm on my 3rd device. No, those are all. Yeah, I agree with everything that you guys said. Christophe, did you have anything else to add to that? No, I didn't want to interrupt you, but I do agree. You know, in academia, there really is this idea of the music industry is like this. It's the recording engineer side of things, like what Mike was saying. I've found that opportunity, like for example, right now in Consumer, opportunities that I've seen within the last 6 to 8 months, definitely customer service, and that's a really good entry level way to get into the music industry. There's a lot of customer service opportunities there. Also, we have opportunities within our factories doing technical stuff, right? Technician side of things, play testing, adjusting. That's a big one, right? Well, obviously we're in the middle of this pandemic crisis, but once this ends, hopefully we're going to have positions opening up, especially for saxophone specialists on the operational sides of play testing and adjusting. We'll probably have almost a whole team, you know, of 4 to 6 play testers and adjusters here up in Elkhart. So also, while I go out and work with a lot of dealers, you know, I spend probably like 60% of my time on the road. I do a lot of educational clinics, like what Mike was talking about is a great opportunity, but I also do a lot of dealer trainings. And dealers are people that are organizations and businesses that not a lot of musicians think about looking into. But there are lots of great opportunities and also lucrative opportunities. And there's a lot of dealers that need a band orchestra specialist. You know, there are a lot of large dealers where they may have a sales team that consists of singers, guitar players, and drummers. and they could really use a brass specialist or a woodwind specialist.
Mhm.
Also, a thing that's really big with music dealers is having road reps. So these are people who go out and service all the schools, and they're heavily dependent on road reps and their knowledge of the instruments and of the accessories and keeping a pulse on what's going on to better help their band programs. But probably the number one need, the number one in-demand position that I see while I'm out in the field is repair technicians. I think by far that's the most in-demand need in the music industry right now, especially from the dealer base. There seems to be a real need for quality, reliable, fast repair technicians. So that's something that that was never brought to my mind or to my attention when I was out getting my degrees. But I certainly had an interest in woodwind repair, and had I known that was an in-demand position, I probably would have given more time or attention to it. Anyway, sorry. So let's go ahead and open it back up to any other questions that people might have.
Yeah, another one. And this is a good one also. This is from James Bunty, and he asked, where can I tell my students to look for these jobs? Like where are they posted, where are they recruited? In higher ed, if someone's looking for a band director position in middle school or high school, that's posted in specific places. If they're looking for positions, in academia, those are posted in specific places. Like where are these jobs? Where can we find if they're open?
That's a really good question. I'll answer first, and then you guys can go as you would like. It's really interesting. So we have 2 factories here in Elkhart, and then we have a factory over in Eastlake, Ohio, which is in Cleveland, near where James is at, right? And then we also have, he's in Cincinnati. Anyway, going that part of the country, and then down in North Carolina at Monroe, that's where our Ludwig factory is at. And we have almost 700 employees in the company. Obviously, many of those are factory employees that are making the instruments and are artisans. And some are artisans, and some are they haven't played an instrument in their life, but man, they've made keys for the last 40 years, and they can assemble keys faster and more accurately than any musician could. The reason I bring that up is these are factories that have been here forever. So we have generational employees. So we have like grandmothers and grandfathers working with their kids and their grandchildren all in the same factory, making trumpet bells or assembling clarinets, things like that. So sometimes we literally put a sign out in front of our factory that say, we have positions open, inquire within. And because we're in Elkhart, we're in the band, capital of America, people who have worked with the company or have worked with other companies will come and apply. So with that said, we as a company, we need to do a better job of getting that out there, those job opportunities out there, but we do post on our websites. And even though that's not the most easily accessible, we haven't found that we've needed to go beyond that. So my recommendation would be find those companies that you are interested in and then regularly visit their websites. I think just like 2 months ago, we were looking for a social media specialist. That's another really cool job around for Conselmer. A social media specialist to look over like our 17 platforms for social media. And that's like Ludwig, Bach, Selmer, Conselmer, with Instagram and Facebook. But I think that one did get sent out to some of these larger, like Indeed and things like that. But the main thing is just keeping a close tab on some of these companies that you'd like to work for. Thoughts, guys?
Some companies also send things out in their newsletters. So if there are certain companies that you're interested in, subscribe to their newsletters. I would also agree with Scott. I would say it's pretty much every company in the music industry could do a better job of spreading the word as far as available jobs. You can check out the NAMM website, NAMM.org, I think, jobs/NAMM.org. And sometimes they have sort of a job listings as people send them to them. But I know that this is also something that they're working really hard to better connect colleges to internship possibilities, job openings, things like that. And they're only, one of the organizations doing this. So I think this is going to be a focus of the music industry going forward, I think, is just doing a better job at staying in touch with all of you at the collegiate level to make sure that you're aware of opportunities for your students.
Right. And another thing to consider is that the music industry it's a very traditional industry.
Old school.
It's traditional, and there's tons of connections within it. And so they work old school in that regard. The idea of going on monster.com and indeed.com is like, whoa, why would we need to do that? We haven't revolutionized our trumpet in 60 years. Why would we revolutionize the way we hire people? So there is some of that mentality shift, but we have
this is a
very forward thinking. Sorry, go ahead.
No, this is the network connection that we spoke just before. It's the same. We are all industry, and there is a website, there is a Facebook, there is Instagram, everything. But at the end of the day, it's always because I know this guy is really good guy. He had a good diploma and something like that, and I want this guy. Sometimes it's like this.
Yeah.
So I would encourage people, if you go to any of the ed shows, like MEA shows or Midwest Band and Orchestra Conference, things like that, introduce yourself to different vendors. That's how I've met a lot of people that we've signed as artist clinicians, or David Gould, our artist relations manager. He's networking constantly, and that's for a lot of people, that's the foot in the door into the industry, whichever part they move into. And like you said, social media, if somebody's looking, to spread the word nowadays, it will definitely pop up on social media. So follow all of your favorite brands and keep an eye out.
It's true. Social media is really important. I joke that the reason I think I got through my doctorate, and I had 2 kids, I was married with 2 kids. And so I think the reason I got through was, 1, I would wake up at 4 a.m. to practice. But 2 was because I canceled my Facebook account. That as a temptation. But then I have a very wise wife, and she said, Scott, you're done with your doctorate, and I think it's really time you get back on social media. And so, if I wouldn't have, I would have missed out on a ton of opportunities, but I definitely would have never seen the posting about this position here. And in fact, when Selma reached out to me, they reached out to me through Facebook Messenger to become an artist. So all those are opportunities that would have never happened if I wasn't plugged into social media. So that's a really good point. Keeping tabs on all of those things.
Yeah, that's cool. So I'm just kind of looking through the questions. There was a similar one that was, do you have any advice for searching for available jobs? So that's you covered that. Another one was, are there any skills you wish you developed before entering the industry?
Yes. I wish I would have spent a lot more time with Excel.
Yep.
And SolidWorks. So SolidWorks is like 3D design programming, and Christophe is excellent at SolidWorks. I'm terrible at it. So Excel and SolidWorks, I wish I would have spent a lot more time. It would have had no benefit to me in my previous career. How about you guys?
I'll echo that on Excel for sure. Luckily, I have some very patient people in my company that taught me how to navigate that. One other thing that would have been helpful for me, maybe more just for my ego in the beginning, would have been just a very, some business one-on-one classes, just to understand the terminology. I remember spending the first, 5 or 6 months listening to my bosses talk and just wondering, what? What does that mean? What does that mean? And sometimes I would actually ask, I'd, be brave enough to ask. And then other times I would just Google it. But, just some very basic business terminology couldn't hurt. It's not something that you would not be able to learn on your own, but it would, would have sped things up for me a little bit. So
just this morning, I had to Google PPAP.
There you go.
You know, it's something that we use all the time here. We know it's for validating a part. You know, it's a process we use for validate. But I didn't know specifically what the acronym even meant. You know, so even now, 2 years later, I'm like, what the heck is? It's not pen, pineapple, pen. What is it?
Right. In my case, it was a bit different because I'm more in charge of the development of mouthpieces. So my first job at the factory was to spend a lot of time on the machine to understand the process making, to understand all the steps, and to ask all the questions I had to, and to be a bit more familiar with all the world and the production way. But also I spend time on Excel and Outlook and all this stuff.
Right. You know, I think no matter what position you go into, you're going to need to learn a lot of new skills. And being musicians, I think we're quite adaptive, and we learn to be really adaptive. And so being able to learn things quickly, being able to learn things on the fly, but also being assertive, but also a really nice person goes a long way. You know, there's lots of times where, in fact, right here, so I'm in my office. I go to Costco and I keep a box of these in my desk because there's always times where I need help with something. And I call it my repentance candy. And, you know, so we have a guru here. His name is Jeff Perkins. I mean, this guy could make a video game out of an Excel sheet. He's such a whiz with Excel. But there's times where I just need something done, and I need it done fast, and I need him to show me how to do it. And I come with a Snickers bar in my hand, and it goes a long way. But if you look at like Christophe Grezes and you look at Mike, these are guys that are, you can tell, I think, just by the interaction, they're assertive, they're type A personalities, but they're also great guys that you wouldn't mind hanging out with in an after-hours session. You know, they're just really nice, easy to get along with, but they also get things done. So having that type of a personality helps a lot in the music industry. Being self-driven is helpful.
Yeah. So here's an interesting question. What jobs in the music industry do you think will be created in the next 10 years that do not exist yet?
That's a really good question. I think a big one right now is data, online data. And I'm trying to think of the exact terminology because I'm not even skilled in that. And Mike, you can probably speak to it a little bit better than I, but when you get into all the statistics and the analyses of online searches. So Google searches, and when they come to your website, where do they go, and trying to track what sales come from those interactions, and being able to streamline all of your social media content and see how they influence your actual sales numbers. I think that's really important. Also, online sales engineering, I think, is going to be really important in the future as well.
Yeah, I'd agree with all of that. Analytics, and that would actually, I think that would be another program I wish I would have been a little bit more familiar with, familiar with at all, actually, before I started my job, would have been even just Google Analytics. You can learn a lot, you know, seeing how people move through your website, what kind of resources are they checking out, what are they ignoring completely, and then you can start to ask yourself, you know, some really honest questions about how your website is performing. Are you really accomplishing what you set out to accomplish? And sometimes you get answers that are not really what you were looking for, but it's the truth. And I think it's important to just take an honest assessment of that. For certain companies, that can be everything. And I'm thinking, you know, a lot about like your online retail stores where they really, you know, they're selling direct to the consumer, which we don't do. But for companies like that, maybe Woodwind, Brasswind, Music and Arts, you know, or any of our brick and mortar stores that also have an online presence, those are skills that I'm sure they would welcome. Many of them are already really ahead of the curve, some of the larger companies especially, but that's really important. One other skill set that I should have mentioned earlier that kind of translates to social media too would be any of you that have any kind of design chops, whether it's Photoshop or some of the, you know, other Adobe programs or whatever. that can come in handy a lot, especially, at a small company where maybe you'll be asked to wear a lot of different hats, like Danzer, for instance. We have people that are doing what sometimes might seem like totally unrelated things, but having flexibility with your workforce can pay off in such a big way. So the more things you can do, even if you're not an expert at all of them, it's going to help you.
Yeah, it's really interesting. For example, I was surprised when I came into Consumer how many people were not musicians. So, for example, we have what we call our creative team. These are all of our like graphic designers, our videographer, our photographer, our social media person, director of communications. So communication obviously is a huge one in that. And many of those people are not musicians, but they're specialists in that. But them having background, or if they would have background with music, with the musical instruments, that goes a long way. So for example, we did have a photographer who did a good job. I mean, she was a great photographer, and she left to go for another company. We brought in someone else who was an orchestral, I think she minored in violin, but she plays in the local orchestra, and she's a great photographer. But just her having that background in terms of how she works with the product team and the sales team and knows how instruments should be set up and lit up, that goes a long way. And same with our social media person. Before we had a social media person who wasn't an instrument specialist, and he still did an outstanding job. He really knew his stuff. But when we're opening this up to other people, there's some candidates who are musicians and are also really skilled in social media. So being able to find, a job like that and also being a musician really adds a lot of value to that. And that makes sense.
Yeah. Probably, Michael, Martin Trio from Van Doren in Paris. Yeah, of course, you know him. He's a saxophone player. We studied together in Paris Conservatory, and he's also a photographer, and he makes movies. And he can combine everything with this, and it's something else for him to know how to make a picture, how to make a movie, to help musician, because he's a musician. He know what musician needs for that. Mm-hmm. And he can do something really, really interesting. So be a musician and to have knowledge in the image, picture, the movies is very, very important, and how to know how to practice with the software for this kind of stuff.
Yeah, audio video is always really helpful. And that's something that, everyone should be working on right now. I think I want to say that the future is content marketing, but I think the past was content marketing.
We're still there, right?
Yeah, we're still there. I mean, that's where it is right now. It's all about content marketing and putting out great quality content and thinking win-win, thinking of providing people of content that they want to see, that they want to hear. That in turn benefits you as well. You help enough people get what they want, and you get what you want. And so starting to do that now and starting to build your chops with audio, video stuff and developing content and marketing just for your own personal brand as a musician will go a long way. I think that helped me a ton coming into this role. There's a great book called Resumes Are Dead, and I love it. I mean, it's an outstanding book. And what it talks about is, look, don't just wait to build your resume. Just find your dream job and just start at least doing as much of it as you can right now. Don't wait until somebody offers it to you. Just get to work and then prove to your future employer, like, look, I've already been doing all this. I'll just apply it to my new position. So that's an idea.
So we have one last question, which is from Ben Sorrell, which was it a difficult decision to leave a teaching job in academia? Do you miss teaching as much? And do you miss teaching as much?
I'll take that one for now. Absolutely. It was a very difficult process to go through taking this job. In fact, when Consumer called me up and asked me if I wanted to come up and interview, I almost turned them down. It was like April It was right in the middle of the solo and ensemble season. I had just tons of stuff going on and working a lot with my students. And I literally didn't have time. So I almost didn't come up for the interview. And then obviously I talked about this previously, but when I did decide to do it, I was so thrilled. You know, it was so neat to learn about the position. But then also when I came into it, I realized the learning curve was just massive. For the first 8 months, I felt like I woke up with my head this far below water every single day. And I'd wake up, 4 or 5 in the morning just to get work done because I had so much to learn and so much to grasp. And so before I took this position, I talked to my wife. She and I sat down and I told her, I said, look, I don't plan on doing any teaching and any performing for the first year of this job because I want it to work out. And I realized that that's the kind of capacity it's going to take up. And so for that first year, I mean, outside of play testing and working on product development, I think I did 1 or 2 gigs. And that was it. I mean, I did my own little practicing and stuff, but I'd really put that by the wayside. And I went from teaching, 80 to 100 kids a week to none. And that really had a psychological effect on me because there's a lot of psychological payoff from teaching. I mean, it's really, it's an upper, it makes you feel great to be able to help students develop on their instrument and progress and grow. But I felt that in this position, at least, I've been able to go out and do lots of master classes at different schools and universities and do some performing. After that 1-year period, I started performing more. And that's really helped a lot. So I still feel that I get my educational fix, but I'd like to think that at heart, I'm an educator, and that's what I love the most. And so I try to find a lot of opportunities to still teach and to still educate in this role. And sometimes that's with our sales team. Sometimes that's doing trainings with them, or sometimes it's doing trainings with dealers. And sometimes it's in negotiation with our operations team, talking about how we're going to work on something and explaining and teaching certain concepts. So, there's still that teaching realm, but in short, yeah, it was definitely a hard decision. I'm very, very fortunate and grateful that I'm able to continue teaching and find opportunities to do that. But I miss the one-on-one teaching a lot, and maybe someday I'll be able to find the bandwidth to do that more. Christophe and Mike, you have any thoughts about that?
Yeah, for me it's a bit different because when just I finished my studies with Claude Delong in Paris Conservatory, I started the job in summer. So I just did 1 year in the North France, but not much. So I don't really know what is to teach all during the 1 year. I don't know exactly. So for me, the choice was a bit different. From the beginning, I started with summer, so I don't really miss teaching.
Yeah, and I would say, of course, I miss teaching, and I've still had a small private studio going up until about a year ago. But in the end, I think for everybody, it's just about finding the right balance. And for me, giving up teaching meant that I could perform more, which is what I love to do first and foremost. So I think it was certainly a difficult decision when it was first kind of came up. It was a lot of soul searching and a lot of kind of pros and cons of, well, this is what I thought I was going to do, but then this seems pretty cool. So let's, how does that translate? What are the common grounds? And I think, like Scott said, there are a lot of common grounds, and I can still play or teach as much as I want after hours. And then there's still a lot of teaching within my job as well. So I wouldn't say I miss teaching terribly at this point. I think I finally found, with a young family, and Scott, I'm sure it's the same for you. It's just always a challenge to find the right balance. And it took about 7 years, but I feel like I finally struck a pretty good balance of work, performing, and right now not teaching that much.
Well, that's good, Mike. It gives me a time frame of when I can start to see balance in my life. Yeah, I will say, and I think that Christophe and Mike would all agree that there isn't anything else in the world I'd rather be doing right now. I mean, I think about other tracks and things I could be doing or could have gone, and tell you what, man, it's really fun to wake up in the morning, and there's nothing else that I'd rather be doing than this job.
Awesome. Well, that was the last question. So, gentlemen, thank you so much. Really great information. Fun visiting with all of you. And yeah, I really appreciate it. I hope you're doing well, and have a great rest of your day.
All right.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us, man.
Thank
I
you
really
very much.
appreciate it.
Yeah, Mike.
And now, guys, you know, if you want to work on Dancer, or on Consumer, or in Summer, just contact us. Maybe we have a job for you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right. Yep. Reach out.
All right.
Find us on social media.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Nathan. Bye-bye.